Hi class, my name is Ava Sullivan, and this week I am presenting my ethical dilemma case study. Is it ethical for the U.S. government to interfere with foreign governments if the purpose is to promote democracy and stable geopolitical relations? Consider how the U.S. government has created a division of PSYOPs, or psychological operations with the use of HUMINT and SIGINT, and how the program may interfere with another government's sovereignty. So what is PSYOPs? PSYOPs is referred to as psychological operations. They are usually unconventional operations run by the U.S. military to further U.S. interests and U.S. government protection or ideals that they want out of foreign governments. For example, U.S. military will use their intelligence, their interpersonal skills, their cultural sensitivity, and foreign language proficiency to help sway opinions and actions of foreign governments, groups, and individuals. They're known for their gray area tactics to influence foreign allies and enemies in support of U.S. Army objectives. The first case study we're going to look at is U.S. use of PSYOPs in the Vietnam War. In the 6th PSYOP Battalion, they launched a mission called Operation Wandering Soul in the late 1960s. The operation involved broadcasting scary audio tracks throughout the jungles at night in the hopes of scarring and demoralizing the Viet Cong. One of the audio tracks is referred to as Ghost Tape Number 10. This was broadcasted from loudspeakers connected to Army helicopters and Navy boats, and it played eerie sounds of gongs banging, whimpering soldiers, and even crying women and other horrifying sounds. All of this was to further the U.S. interest of scaring away the Viet Cong and demoralizing them and scaring them so that the U.S. could be on the winning side and promote their own interests in Vietnam. The second case study we're going to look at is the U.S. use of PSYOPs trying to turn the tables in the former Soviet Union of communism. So in this case study, PSYOPs were used by spreading American culture across communist borders, which incited dissent in Eastern Europe. During this time, the CIA understood that spreading information of culture worked in their benefit to counter the spread of communism and communist objectives. This information was spread mostly related to cultural ideas that displayed American ideals such as American jazz, rock and roll, and Hollywood films. These concepts all reflected American identity and the fall of the Iron Curtain. And the whole purpose of this was to spread propaganda and potentially show Soviet citizens to sway towards democracy and away from communism. This was all for U.S. interests. So now we're going to look at the theoretical approaches and see if they apply to PSYOPs. First, we're going to look at the just war intelligence principles. So Bellaby's just intelligence principles are just cause, legitimate authority, intention, proportion, last resort, and discrimination. In this ethical scenario, the U.S. has legitimate authority to promote their own interests and legitimate authority to protect their own citizens. However, they do not have the authority to intervene with other governments' sovereignty and influence events like foreign elections and to try to convince people and foreign leaders to sway towards democracy versus communism. I know the examples I mentioned are very propaganda-based and through, media and pamphlets and spreading sounds and American cultural ideals. However, there are a lot of U.S. military unconventional operations that take place abroad to sway military and political leaders of foreign nations to do things to further U.S. interests. Because those things are all probably very classified. However, these examples are very simple examples of how PSYOPs is used to further U.S. interests. So the U.S. felt by promoting U.S. propaganda and carrying out these gray area operations that they feel they need to do their part to protect U.S. interests and U.S. citizens. So by promoting democracy, prevents the spread of communism, and prevents future wars, prevents future dictators, and promotes diplomacy. The U.S. felt like they were doing their job and they felt that they had the right intentions. So under Bella B's just intelligence principles, the U.S. had the right intentions. Next, the U.S. has the right proportion because the gains of the PSYOPs mission outweigh the potential harm caused to the foreign nation and their civilians. I do not think PSYOPs missions are ever used as a last resort, so I'm going to argue that the U.S. did not have last resort authority. Lastly, the U.S. has proper discrimination when deciding whether something is a legitimate target. In the scenario of the Soviet Union and communism, the U.S. had proper discrimination because they had an agenda and a target country where they were planning to carry out propaganda and PSYOPs in hopes to further democratization and U.S. interests. Therefore, all of these principles can be applied. However, I do think that Bella B's just intelligence principles are very stretched out and seen through a very specific lens when applied to this scenario. I don't think, because they don't have last resort, I don't think they have the authority or the just cause. I think that under Bella B's just intelligence principles, that PSYOPs is unethical. According to Kantian ethics, interfering with another government as well as influencing citizens of another nation is unethical. Kantian ethics are based off of universal ethical principles called the categorical imperative. And he focuses on always respecting the humanity in others, as well as always believing black and white rules, that one rule will apply to everyone. So if lying is bad, it applies in all scenarios, because a lot of this goes underneath the scenes, behind the scenes, and a lot of governments don't know that PSYOPs missions are taking place, whether it be propaganda or military operations. Under Kantian ethics, PSYOPs would be unethical. Lastly, under the utilitarian theory, something is ethical if it brings some levels of happiness or satisfaction to the individual group in the scenario. Specifically, in this scenario, the U.S. government is the group, and therefore carrying out PSYOPs would further U.S. interests and brings a level of satisfaction to the U.S. government, and therefore maximize the happiness of well-being for individuals. Therefore, conducting PSYOPs is ethical according to the utilitarian theory. How is the ethical dilemma resolved? So I think that it's not technically resolved. It's still happening today. However, the U.S. military has been conducting PSYOPs since World War I, and because it is how they handle the gray area operations, I don't think it will ever stop. Now, a lot of controversy revolves around PSYOPs because it is happening abroad, and a lot of the other nations don't know what's happening. An argument for this is that there are a lot of other governments also carrying out intelligence operations in their own form of PSYOPs. However, because it benefits the U.S., I do think the utilitarian theory is the only theory that resolves the PSYOPs ethical dilemma. And because because it is the U.S.'s job to have eyes and ears all over the world to prevent and protect the U.S. against any threats from both nation-state and non-state actors, they have this idea of being proactive and preemptively conducting PSYOPs abroad to prevent any threats such as communist threats, or if we were in wartime, like similar to the Viet Cong example, that would be an example of the U.S. furthering their interests and doing their job to be the eyes and ears and protect U.S. Citizens and U.S. allies. Therefore, the utilitarian theory is really the only theory, in my mind, that resolves this ethical dilemma. The consequences of the approach, the utilitarian approach is great to further your own interests, but it justifies almost any action, and sometimes actions that are clearly wrong. So, unconventional operations that are happening, that are classified, that I'm not privy to. Maybe a lot of them are very, very clearly wrong, and that could undermine a lot of trust if it were ever to be leaked to the media, and ruin the reputation of the U.S. and international diplomacy as a whole. I really think that utilitarian theory is the only theory here that is very clear and cut that resolves this ethical dilemma. I think Bellaby's principles are a little bit of a stretch, and I think Kantian ethics are just too black and white to apply here. So yes, I hope you enjoyed my ethical dilemma, and I look forward to hearing your responses and any questions that you guys may have. Thanks so much.